Hello, chess friends, and welcome to Jozarov chess channel, and welcome to a spectacular game that I found on the official and beautiful computer chess rating list website, the popular CCRL. We have here Stockfish 16 against another top engine Ruby in an amazing French defense, the Tarrasch variation. And again, we'll see really cool opening ideas here introduced to us by Stockfish. Very great tactics all over the board, but then of course also a beautiful and spectacular endgame. So this game again, I think, had everything that we love to see in chess. Really a whole really beautiful spectacular gameplay by Stockfish 16. So let's see now what happened with the white pieces. The fish opened with the move e4. Ruby's response was e6, the French. We have d4, d5, knight to d2, the Tarrasch variation, knight to f6, and now we have the move e5, which becomes now the close variation. The center is closed, the center is blocked out. Of course, white is attacking this side of the board. Black is of course trying to do progressive ideas on the queen side. We have bishop to d3, normal development, c5. We have here queenside counterattack by the RubiChess engine. Stockfish to port, now the pawn chain fixes simply the structure, and now knight to c6. Normal development, queen to b6. You see black is of course putting more pressure against the weak pawn on d4. Now comes kingside castling, c takes d4, and now c takes d4. We have analyzed now so far many games here on my YouTube chess channel in this particular position. Again, I'm pointing out knight takes d4 is possible, can be played, nothing wrong with this line, but I think this line leads into a complicated tactical line in which of course white will simply take, black takes, and then white gets an extra tempo against the queen wherever the queen goes. For instance, then we continue with rook to e1, and the issue I think here a little bit for black is that black has now tough time to castle because all of the pieces of white are simply coordinated towards the king side. White's knight will also be included into the attack. Rook is very active. White builds really beautiful attacking formation. Queenside castling is never here a possibility because the c file is already open, so this is not working. You could of course try here maybe something like queen to g4 to be more active, but then with h3, bishop to g5, still it's very complicated. So I don't want to dive too much into this line, but it's really one of the most complicated French defenses that you can play. So that's why here after move c takes d4, Ruby tried a5, simply putting more pressure on the queen side. Ruby continues the pressure where Ruby is better of course on this side of the board. Rook to e1, bishop to e7, h3. We have now the move a4 here again by Ruby, again a progressive idea on this side of the board, and now pardon me, a4, and now a3 here by Stockfish, simply blocking out also the potential a3 move. If you allow then then you could after move b3 face many dark square problems. If you're forced maybe to push the pawn further, then of course black has some great chances with knight to b4 and similar attacking ideas. After move a4, Stockfish blocks this out with the move a3. We have knight takes d4, knight takes d4. Now we reach basically a similar position, but now after move knight to f3 and queen to b6, now comes the beautiful part about this line. You see white lost the tempo but has always the initiative. Here we have also an extra tempo now against the queen. Whatever you do, it's very tricky. For instance, you could maybe try queen to b2, but this is already game over. Look at this, the queen gets trapped after a couple more moves. Queen to d2, rook to b1 is going to happen. There's simply no good square for the queen. You have to maybe in some lines sacrifice some material in order to stay with the queen, but this is game over. Even if you try, for instance, bishop to c5 here to somehow maybe compete on this diagonal. I've analyzed also this line at home. Seems natural that you play the game like this, but still look at this. Rook to c1, you have to trade it off. You're trying maybe now queen takes b2, but again, I would not love to play anymore this game from black's perspective. There's always this kind of an attacking idea. The rooks are very active. You have to take. Now we play something like this, and black's king is naked, so the heavy artillery, the rooks are coming into the game. In my opinion, game over already here for black. So after bishop to e3, that's why here knight to c5 was played by Ruby. Didn't want to give up basically the best minor piece on the board, because when we have this blocked out pawn structure like this, we always evaluate the position which are good pieces, and always the dark bishop is a good, at least defensive piece for black. So black is trying to keep at least this piece on the board. So that's why knight to c5. We have rook to c1 by the fish, again attacking the knight on c5, bishop to d7, and now bishop to b1. Stockfish prepares really again new attacking chances on this side of the board. Again, it would be very risky to pick up here the pawn on b2 because the queen was also overloaded to the defense of the knight on c5. You can maybe try here something like rook to c8, but then with queen to d4, again, it gets a little bit tricky. You can maybe try here something like, I don't know, queen to b3, knight to b3 or similar stuff, but there's always the pressure here on the c file. This move rook to c8 has been played, at least I'm seeing one game in the database. The continuation was simply queen to d8 by black, then afterwards, after queen to d4, then here queen to g4 was played in the game, ended with a draw. So maybe this was one of the good approaches by black, simply competing somehow on the c file. But now after move bishop to b1, we have here a new move. From this point on, I'm not seeing games in the database anymore. Queen to a5. I will not say this is a theoretical novelty or something, but simply a new move. Maybe even a tiny little bit inaccurate. Maybe this whole approach with rook to c8 was a little bit better, including more pieces into the game. But now Stockfish uses this moment, uses simply this endangered queen position and plays now a tricky move, knight to d2. This, of course, comes with the idea to prevent knight to b3 by black. If here RubiChess continue with rook to c8 and now queen to g4. This is many times an aggressive approach whenever the knight is not on f6, because we have played e5 in the beginning and the knight was deflected from the defense of the king. Then always the queen can come actively into the game like this. Queen to g4, very dangerous move now to handle for RubiChess. What should you do if you play kingside castling? Then there's always this, I don't know, I would call it even a beginner's threat. Bishop to h6 forces black to play g6, and then we can even grab the rook. Although maybe even if you give up the rook, I'm not saying this would be a bad position for black, because black has in some lines also the supported pass pawn. If this game reaches the fully endgame stage, of course, black should be winning. So that's why white has to make something out of this attack, and the RubiChess played basically the only good defensive idea, g6. But this move again weakens the pawn structure in front of the king. You see, with every tiny little threat, Stockfish is provoking some structural pawn weaknesses, square weaknesses in black's position. Here, Stockfish continues with knight to f3. What should you do? For instance, if you try castle now, it would be again very risky because of bishop to d2. We hit the queen, then we try something like bishop to b4. You can maybe try king to g7, but now h4. h4 is, I think, a very dangerous idea. Then after something like h5, queen to f4, staying with the queen on dark squares, knight to g5 is going to happen. Again, you can be the judge of this position. I don't like always this kind of position to play with the black pieces. We can also in some lines maybe try bishop to d2, getting the bishop here again, trying maybe the dangerous check. Rook lifts are possible, rook to e3, rook to g3 afterwards, knight to g5. So many attacking options again, only I think here for white. So that's why after move knight to f3 here, RubiChess tried h6, try to keep somehow the dark squares protected. But again, new structural weakness. Stockfish is with every move provoking, as I said, simply new problems in black's position. Here, Stockfish continues with rook to c3. Stockfish noticed, of course, that the rooks are not connected, so that's why Stockfish uses now this moment in order to double up the rooks now on the c file. We have rook to c6, knight to d4, an attack against the rook, and now comes maybe even the critical moment, at least one of the critical moments, I think, in this game for sure. Here, RubiChess makes a tiny little inaccuracy in the beginning. The Stockfish engine doesn't like this next move by black. Here RubiChess tried rook to b6. Actually, what Stockfish is suggesting is that you sacrifice the rook. Stockfish likes then this position after something like knight takes c6, b takes c6, and bishop to a2, because you don't want to tolerate, of course, this bishop on this active square. Then you have this progress, c5. Although you're down the exchange, this would be maybe more playable for black. Interesting line that Stockfish suggests here. Then we play something like bishop to b3, a takes b3, we double up. Then you have to play something like this. You continue probably with the rook against two bishops. At least you got rid of the d and c pawn now in this line, but I'm not sure if I would love to play anymore this game with the white pieces anymore, because when the bishops are somehow getting into the game, I think this could be Also very dangerous position here for white. So this was maybe, as I said, this is simply just a suggested line by Stockfish. I myself would probably play also rook to b6, or I would maybe even retreat to c8, but never, I think, would give up simply the rook for the knight. But tricky ideas also that Stockfish is suggesting. So rook to b6 now, the last move by RubiChess. We have rook from e to c1. Stockfish continues the pressure. The problem here for black is that you don't have time to pick up the weak pawn on b2. Look how dangerous this position can become if you play something like this. Bishop takes g6, f takes g6, then you play even rook to c5. Look how the position can explode in one single moment if you make a tiny little inaccuracy here. Bishop to c5, look at this. This queen is coming into the game. Knight takes e6. You have to pick up another piece. Rook takes c5. Pardon me, queen takes e6 first here. If you play something like bishop to e3, then you get checkmate with rook to c8. You don't have time here to pick up the piece. You're getting simply destroyed by white piece activity. Also, queen to f6 is in one line possible, so you cannot protect everything here, in my opinion. Again, game over here for black. Very spectacular tactic. It would have been after rook takes b2 here, simply bishop takes g6. So after rook from e to c1, RubiChess tried h5. Stockfish keeps the pressure around the square g6. We have knight to b3. Again, I'm pointing out, again, even if you now play in this position, rook takes b2, again, a similar tactic, rook to c5, knight to e6, rook to c5, and the game is over, I think, here for black. After queen to g3, we have knight to b3 here by RubiChess. Interesting choice, a move that RubiChess probably should have played earlier, but now this move, knight to b3, comes also with a threat against the rook on c1. But now Stockfish shows its pure brutal attack. Here Stockfish plays again the spectacular bishop takes g6. It's a little bit different now because the knight is not anymore on c5, so RubiChess thought that this could be maybe a good idea. But look at this. If you play something like here knight takes d4, let's see first this option in the game here after bishop to g6, knight to c1 was played. But let's see now what happens if you play here knight takes d4. Then of course white simply continues with bishop to d4. You pick up here this one, and now bishop to c5, not queen to g6. Bishop to c5 is then one of the best moves here for white. After something like rook to g8, in order to protect finally the pawn on g6, now we simply pick up the bishops. We get the queen active into the game, and now the heavy artillery is again coming, and you will eventually lose also the rook on g8. The g6 pawn is weak. Although this is about equal material, but black's king is more and more endangered. I think this should be also completely winning here for white. So after bishop to g6, that's why RubiChess tried knight takes c1. This was the first idea. What seems that it's nothing wrong with this move. Also in some lines, maybe with some threats of to play knight to e2. But Stockfish continues now with the brilliant idea. Bishop to d2. Attacking simply, first of all, the queen. The queen is now in danger. There is always this discovered check idea. Rook to c8, and the queen is lost. Let's see what happens if you step back with the queen. If you play something like queen to a8, again, this wasn't played in the game, but look at this. Bishop to f7, king to f7, rook to f3. You have to step back. The queen is coming into the game. You have to play something like rook to f8, and now bishop to g5 would be the winning idea. If you, of course, pick up the bishop, then it's checkmate here. If you pick up the rook, then it's checkmate on e7. Very dirty tactics. You can maybe try to step back, but now we finally take, and we can take out the queen. The game is over again here for black. After bishop to d2, that's why here f takes g6 was played, but now comes this idea. Rook to c8, bishop to c8, Stockfish grabs now the queen. Very cool tactic here by the fish. We have rook to c6, and now bishop to b4. Bishop takes, we have queen to g6, king to d7, and now a takes b4. Let's stop and evaluate this position. Here Stockfish has the queen for 2 rooks and a minor piece. So usually this should not be enough. If this would be maybe a more compact position by black, this would be enough material. But this powerful knight on d4, the weaknesses on e6 are here really visible. And the main issue is now that this pawn is rolling. You see now the importance of this pawn. After rook to e8, here RubiChess is trying to get the pieces back into the game. Stockfish simply continue with b5, rook to c7, b6, and now after rook to c4, now comes knight to f5. The knight comes in a beautiful and spectacular way into the game. The problem is now you cannot take it because you get checkmated. Look how important it was to bring now also the pawn here to deflect the rook from the defense of the 6th rank. Very dirty tactic again by the fish. After knight to f5, rook to d8, we have knight to e3. Stockfish reroutes the knight, finds a better square. We have a new check. King drops back, and now queen to c7, and finally Stockfish gets at least the rook back. Has now, I think, enough compensation. Has of course the queen for rook and a minor piece. It's a different story now, but it was really cool how Stockfish managed to include the knight into the game. Really wild stuff. Knight to d3, queen to e8 check, king to b4. If you play king to b6, then we pick up simply this one. You can maybe try this one, but now with queen to d4, the knight is lost on e5. So that's why after queen to e8, we have king to b4, and now queen to f8. Stockfish pins the rook. King goes to b5, and again queen to f3. Simply hitting now the weak pawn. Stockfish wants to reach the fully endgame stage now. Wants, of course, to create a pass pawn here on this side of the board. Knight takes b2. RubiChess has also a pass pawn here on this side of the board, but Stockfish plays first a check, and now plays a very important move, knight to c2, not allowing, of course, a3. Then knight takes a3. You cannot take because of the activity by the queen. So after knight to c2, bishop to d7, h4, king takes b6, and Stockfish grabs now finally the pawn. If you play here a3 now, because the king is not pinned anymore, then we get this one, queen to g4. You're trying to push the pawn further, but now with queen to d4, we're controlling, of course, the a1 square. We're controlling also the rook, and now the pawns can march here on this side of the board. The pawns are simply unstoppable here for black. After queen to h5, knight to d2 was played by RubiChess. Stockfish attacks also the bishop. We have bishop to c6, f3, knight to e4. Interesting choice by Stockfish, because actually f takes e4. If you play this, then after rook to c2 and something like e takes d5, then black can deliver check, and after bishop to d5, the Stockfish engine thinks here that this should be an equal game, especially because of some attacking ideas to get the rook somehow on the 2nd rank, maybe here or here. This square is taken, but the main issue is, of course, that we can finally, I think, get the rook here and also slowly push the pawn, maybe even give up the rook and the bishop for the queen around the square g2, maybe if white protects it with queen to g6, but then also this pass pawn should be very dangerous. So that's why after move knight to e4, Stockfish did not take out now the knight. You see now the queen is disconnected from the defense of the knight to c2. Stockfish plays now first knight to b4, knight to g3, king to h2, new check, king to h3, knight to d2, and now h5. Stockfish is announcing, as I said, the fully endgame stage. Stockfish simply wants to get something out of this pawns on the king side. Rook to c1, queen to h6, a new check, nothing spectacular, and now finally also the e6 pawn is taken. King to b5, knight to c2, we have a3, queen to e7, new check, new attack against the pawn, queen to b4, and now after king to a6, again, this beautiful idea, queen to c3, knight is controlling this one, and also the queen is controlling here the a1 square. We have king to a7, we have king to d4, king to b8, and Stockfish simply pushes the new pawn. You see how important it was to take out also the e6 pawn. Now there is a new problem in black's position. After bishop to a4, attack against the knight, Stockfish simply push the pawn further, and you cannot pick up the piece because a new queen will be promoted and it comes with a check. So that's why bishop to e8, Stockfish attacks now the bishop, knight to d6, queen to b2, rook to h5, and now queen takes a2. So Stockfish got rid of this annoying pawn on the a file, but still has, of course, these two pawns here, and also this unpleasant pawn on in e7. We have rook to e5 attacking the pawn. We have queen to a5, rook takes e7, queen to d8. RubiChess plays the only move knight to c8, protecting the king, but also protecting the rook. Knight to d4, beautiful square for the knight, controlling the center of the board. And now after bishop to a4, queen to d5 here, Stockfish is saying, I'll simply push my pawns now. g5, bishop to d7, Stockfish goes behind the pawn. Knight to d6, g6, pushing the pawn further. King to f2, getting an attack against the rook. Rook has to play here, and now Stockfish simply pushes the pawn further. And in this particular position, RubiChess resigned. There's simply no way that you can stop this. Stop this pawn. You can of course play bishop to e6. The knight is controlling the square. This knight is misplaced, of course, cannot stop this pawn. So this is beautiful, beautiful endgame win here by Stockfish 16. So beautiful game, really cool tactics. I think we have seen all over the board interesting lines of the Tarrasch defense, of the Tarrasch variation of the French defense. Spectacular way to proceed, I think, here. Very beautiful game. I think you can maybe use some of these methods in your preparation by white, in your preparation by black. I think there are many cool lines that we have seen here, but then of course also beautiful endgame here by Stockfish 16. Really, I think, an interesting gameplay by the best chess engine in the world. So, okay, I hope that you enjoyed this game. If you want to see more epic and beautiful, spectacular games like this, check out our Combat Chess Games Play by Computer series. Here's the link of our playlist, and if you like this content, don't forget to subscribe to my channel. See you soon with some more videos, and what do we say? Chess is the best, of course.